He stood on the balcony of the most expensive mansion in the state, a glass of champagne in his hand, smiling as security escorted his wife of 10 years through the front gate and out into the rain. In that moment, Adrian Vale believed he had won. He believed the prenuptial agreement protected everything. He believed the woman he had underestimated for a decade had no move left to make. He believed she was leaving with nothing but 2 suitcases and silence. What Adrian did not know was that the ground beneath his polished shoes was never truly his. The driveway below, the gardens wrapping around the house, the iron gate at the entrance, and the 60 acres stretching beyond the cliffs had all been waiting for one small mistake, one signature, one act of arrogance. And he had just made it. This is the story of a man who thought wealth made him untouchable, only to discover that the quietest person in the room had seen the ending long before he did. The invitation had been printed on thick ivory paper and dusted with gold trim so heavy it felt more like a trophy than a card. It announced the 10th anniversary celebration of Adrian and Evelyn Vale. Black tie only. An evening for the city's elite. An evening to celebrate power, legacy, and success. But when Evelyn looked at the card in the mirror of the master suite, it did not feel like a celebration. It felt like a performance. Another one. She adjusted the strap of her emerald gown, a simple dress she had bought from a department store only days earlier after Adrian had quietly canceled her cards. He had called it an accounting issue, a temporary error. He had not even looked up from his phone when he said it. Below her, the estate was glowing. On the sweeping lawn above the cliffs, hundreds of guests were arriving beneath strings of warm lights. Luxury cars lined the private road. City leaders, investors, developers, tech founders, media personalities, and polished couples in tailored black and silver flowed through the entrance as if entering a palace. They were not there for Evelyn. They were there for Adrian Vale, the man who had built a regional construction firm into a global development empire. The man magazines called visionary. The man business channels called fearless. The man who smiled for cameras and spoke about leadership while people around him quietly bent themselves into shapes that made him comfortable. And Evelyn? In their eyes, she was part of the decor. The composed wife with the soft voice. The woman who poured tea, remembered birthdays, hosted charity dinners, and made discomfort look like elegance. Evelyn. His voice came from the doorway. She turned. Adrian stood there, adjusting his cufflinks, perfectly pressed, perfectly groomed, silver beginning to show at his temples in a way people called distinguished. He looked as sharp as ever, but his eyes had no warmth in them. "You're not wearing the diamond necklace," he said. "I couldn't open the case," Evelyn answered gently. "The safe code was changed." Adrian exhaled as if she were the burden of his day. "Then wear pearls. Chloe is already downstairs helping with the guests. Try not to look lost." Chloe. The name alone was enough to make Evelyn's chest tighten. Chloe Hart was Adrian's assistant. Young, bright, ambitious, always present, always smiling a little too easily around him. For months, Evelyn had watched her arrive earlier, stay later, and slowly slip into spaces that had once belonged to the marriage. Evelyn said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence often told her more than argument ever could. She walked down the grand staircase, her hand gliding over marble that reflected every chandelier above. The house was beautiful in the way magazines love. Tall glass walls, ocean views, imported stone, designer lines, clean, expensive symmetry. But once, before Adrian redesigned it into a monument to himself, it had been different. Once, it had belonged to Evelyn's grandmother. Once, it had been warm. The oak walls were gone now. The old library shelves had been replaced. The family portraits had been moved to storage. The heart of the place had been polished into distance. As Evelyn stepped into the ballroom, the conversations did not stop, but the energy shifted. Eyes moved toward her and then away. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked almost relieved it was not happening to them. Near the champagne tower stood Adrian, entertaining a cluster of guests with one hand in his pocket and the other resting casually behind Chloe's back. She leaned into him as if she already belonged there. Evelyn walked toward them and offered a calm smile. "Happy anniversary," she said. She reached for his hand. Adrian pulled it away and glanced at his watch. The room quieted. Then Adrian lifted one finger toward the DJ. The music stopped. A hush rolled across the ballroom so completely that even the servers froze with trays in their hands. Adrian took the microphone and stepped onto the small platform by the dance floor. Chloe joined him. Not beside him, right next to him. "Thank you all for coming," Adrian began, his voice smooth and practiced. 10 years is a long time. Long enough to build something extraordinary. Long enough to learn what moves a future forward and what keeps it standing still. Some guests smiled politely. Others exchanged quick looks. Evelyn stayed where she was, hands loosely folded, waiting for the familiar public version of gratitude, the speech where he credited partnership while meaning convenience. Instead, Adrian smiled wider. "And business," he said, "is about evolution. Sometimes growth means making difficult changes. Sometimes it means having the courage to leave the past behind." The air changed. Evelyn could feel it before the words landed. "Evelyn and I have shared a chapter," Adrian continued, now looking directly at her. "But I need a partner who matches the next phase of my life, my pace, my vision, my future." His arm slid around Chloe's waist. A wave of shock passed through the room. Chloe raised her left hand, just enough for the diamond ring to catch the chandelier light. "So tonight," Adrian announced, "is not only an anniversary celebration, it is also a farewell." No one moved. No one breathed. Evelyn stood still, her expression unreadable. "Our attorneys have already delivered the divorce papers," Adrian said. "I thought it would be more respectful to say it in person." Respectful. The word nearly made someone in the back laugh from disbelief, but the sound died before it formed. Evelyn's lips parted. "You're divorcing me?" "I'm setting us both free," Adrian replied. "The agreement is clear. You receive the older vehicle, a cash settlement, and whatever fits in 2 suitcases. My team has already arranged the packing." A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the marble floor. "Adrian," Evelyn said softly, finally stepping forward. "Not like this. Not here." He looked around as if genuinely confused. "Why not here? This is exactly where truth belongs." "This is my home." He laughed. The sound was dry and empty. "Your home?" he repeated. "Evelyn, look around. I paid for this renovation. I paid for the steel, the glass, the landscaping, the staff, the security, the systems, the entire lifestyle. This is my house. You've simply been living in it." 2 guards approached behind her. One of them had accepted coffee from her almost every morning for 3 years. He could not meet her eyes. "Escort Miss Bennett off the property," Adrian said, using her maiden name with deliberate precision. And make sure nothing valuable leaves with her. A quiet gasp moved through the guests. Evelyn's voice trembled for the first time. Please, where am I supposed to go? Adrian turned away and kissed Chloe on the cheek, as if the answer no longer concerned him. The guards took Evelyn gently but firmly by the arms. They guided her through the crowd of people she had welcomed into this home, celebrated with, donated beside, sat with, listened to, and remembered. People for whom she had hosted dinners and sent flowers and handwritten notes. No one stepped in. They parted silently, lifting champagne glasses to their lips while a marriage was dismantled in front of them. Outside, rain had begun to fall. 2 suitcases sat at the edge of the gravel drive. The great doors closed behind her. She looked at the guard nearest to her. Please, I don't have my car. He swallowed hard. Mr. Vale said transportation can meet you outside the main gate. You cannot remain on the drive. So they walked her down the long winding road, past fountains and statues and trimmed hedges she had once helped choose with her grandmother, all the way to the black iron gate. Then it opened. She stepped through, and it shut behind her with a final metallic sound that seemed to echo all the way back up the hill. Evelyn stood in the rain in her green dress, shivering, looking through the bars at the warm lights of the mansion in the distance. Then the music came back on. The party had resumed. She lowered her eyes to her phone. 14% battery. She dialed the only number she knew by heart. The call connected almost instantly. Malcolm, she said. Her voice was calm now. Too calm. It's time. Begin. For the next 3 weeks, Adrian Vale lived like a man who believed consequences belonged to other people. With Evelyn gone, the house changed quickly. Chloe brought in designers. The rose garden Evelyn had planted with her mother was removed and replaced with geometric stone planters. The old mahogany shelves in the library were stripped out for pale lacquer and glass. Family things disappeared. The place became sleeker, colder, brighter, emptier. Adrian loved it, or at least he told himself he did. There were no arguments, no legal threats, no emotional messages, no sudden demands. The divorce papers had been filed. Evelyn had not challenged anything. She knows she has no case, Adrian told his chief financial officer, Victor Lang, over drinks one evening. The agreement was airtight. The company, the accounts, the house, the vehicles, all secure. Victor did not look convinced. It's too quiet, he said. Evelyn always noticed more than people assumed. Adrian waved him off. She noticed flower arrangements and place settings. Let's not turn her into a strategist. Victor leaned back. Then why hasn't she called? Adrian smiled into his glass. Because she understands she lost. He walked to the window and looked over the western stretch of forest bordering the estate. Dense trees, ravines, premium land. I'm developing that side next, he said. Luxury eco-villas, 20 units, maybe more. Victor frowned. I thought that section had restrictions. Everything has restrictions until the owner changes them, Adrian said. He believed it, completely. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning. Adrian was halfway through breakfast when the intercom buzzed. Mr. Vale, the new guard said. There's a construction crew at the gate. Good, Adrian replied. That's my development team for the western parcel. Let them in. A pause. Sir, they're not here for the forest. They say they're here for the gate. Adrian frowned. What about the gate? They say they've been authorized to remove it. Adrian stood so fast his chair slammed backward. He stormed from the house, with Chloe hurrying after him in heels, one hand on his arm, asking questions he ignored. At the bottom of the drive, a bulldozer sat idling beside a utility truck marked Pendleton Advisory Group. A man in a hard hat and dark overcoat stood calmly near the keypad entrance, holding a clipboard. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Adrian shouted. The man turned. He was older, composed, his glasses dotted lightly with morning mist. "Mr. Vale?" he asked. "I am Adrian Vale, and you are seconds away from being removed." The man gave a small nod. "My name is Malcolm Pendleton. I represent the legal owner of this land. We are here to remove an unauthorized barrier obstructing an access route." Adrian laughed once in disbelief. "Unauthorized barrier? That is the private gate to my estate." Malcolm opened the folder in his hands and removed a document. "To the residents, perhaps, not to the land." Adrian snatched the copy. Old deed paper, stamped seals, survey lines. "This is nonsense." "You purchased the structure at 1400 Cliffside Point 10 years ago," Malcolm said evenly. "You also received a 99-year conditional lease on the surrounding land." "No, I bought the estate." "You bought the building," Malcolm corrected. "The land remained in trust." Chloe stepped forward. "This is absurd." Malcolm did not look at her. Clause 4B. In the event of a legal dissolution of marriage between the leaseholder and a direct descendant of the Bennett family, the land lease terminates immediately, and all rights revert to the Bennett family trust. Adrian stopped breathing for half a beat. Malcolm continued. "Evelyn Bennett is a direct descendant. You initiated divorce proceedings. The moment those papers were filed, the lease ended." Adrian's face lost color. "I have the deed in my safe." "You have the deed to the house," Malcolm replied. "The house occupies less than half an acre. The surrounding 60-plus acres do not belong to you." Malcolm pointed toward the gravel road, the fountain, the lawn, the pool area, the gardens, the trees. "The ground beneath all of this reverted to Evelyn Bennett 3 weeks ago." Chloe turned to Adrian with wide eyes. "Tell him this is wrong." But Adrian was no longer listening. He was scanning the pages, searching for error, loophole, rescue. There was none. Malcolm stepped aside and lifted one hand toward the driver. The bulldozer rolled forward. "Stop!" Adrian shouted. Too late. Metal groaned. Bolts snapped. The black iron gate Adrian had treated like a symbol of ownership was pulled free from its hinges and dragged aside like scrap. Malcolm adjusted his glasses. "You will receive an invoice for removal and roadway restoration. Have a good day, Mr. Vale." Adrian raced back up the drive with his phone pressed to his ear. "Get Carter on the line, now!" By the time he reached the front steps, his attorney had answered. "Carter, some lunatic just tore down my gate and is claiming I don't own the land." There was a long silence. Then Carter exhaled slowly. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." "Then speak." "We received a courier package from Pendleton Advisory. I pulled your original transaction file." "Adrian, the land was never sold to you. Your former lawyer closed the house transfer and the lease separately." "That's impossible." "You declined the full secondary review at the time," Carter said. You said you didn't want to waste money on duplicating title analysis. Adrian closed his eyes. A memory flashed. A younger version of himself signing quickly, smiling, rushing. Certain. What does this mean? He asked. It means the driveway isn't yours. The right of access isn't yours. The easements for utilities may not be yours either. As if the house itself had been listening, the lights flickered. Then everything went dark. The refrigeration hum disappeared. The hallway panels shut down. The security monitors blinked out. From upstairs, Chloe called down, her voice sharp with panic. The Wi-Fi is gone. The lights are out. Adrian ran to the window. At the lower edge of the property, near the main utility line, crews were disconnecting service connections. No, he whispered. Then his phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. He opened it. A formal PDF titled Proposed Access Sale. Dear occupant, since you are currently residing in a structure located on trust-owned land without a valid lease, you are occupying the premises under temporary tolerance only. However, in the interest of reason, the owner is willing to offer the following: 50 feet of driveway access, $10 million. Sewage and electrical easement rights, $15 million. Response window, 24 hours. After that period, daily land use fees will apply. Signed, Evelyn Bennett. Adrian stared at the screen in disbelief. Then anger rose through him so quickly it made his hands shake. He slammed the phone against the dashboard of his car. He had barely stepped out when a police cruiser appeared beyond the barrier line now forming near the end of the drive. Relief flashed across his face. Perfect, he muttered. They can stop this. He climbed onto one of the concrete blocks and waved. Officer, over here. I'm being blocked in. The officer approached with a paper in hand. Are you Adrian Vale? Yes. My former wife is illegally obstructing access to my residence. The officer looked at the warrant, then back at him. Mr. Vale, I have an order for your arrest. The world seemed to stop. For what? Corporate fraud, financial misrepresentation, and embezzlement. Following an audit of Vale Global accounts, a whistleblower submitted extensive supporting records. Adrian stared at him. A whistleblower? The officer folded the paper. Evelyn Bennett. It was the first moment in years that Adrian truly felt uncertainty. Not annoyance. Not inconvenience. Not anger. Uncertainty. He looked back at the dark mansion, then at the barrier, then at the officer standing calmly on the other side of it. For the first time, he understood that he was not controlling the board anymore. He was standing on it. The county holding cell was a long way from Cliffside Point. For a man who wore custom suits and treated discomfort like a personal insult, everything about that place felt unreal. The air smelled of disinfectant and old walls. The jumpsuit scratched his skin. The metal cot offered no mercy. The coffee tasted like punishment. The questions kept coming, and every answer seemed to lead deeper into something he had spent years making sure no one would ever find. 48 hours later, a guard banged on the bars. Legal visit. Adrian stood immediately. Is it Carter? The guard gave no answer. He was escorted down the corridor, wrists secured, mind racing. He expected his attorney. He expected damage control. He expected strategy. Instead, when the door opened, Evelyn was sitting on the other side of the reinforced glass. For a moment, Adrian almost did not recognize her. She looked nothing like the woman he had pushed through the gate. She wore a tailored midnight blue blazer. Her hair framed her face in soft waves. Her posture was upright, calm, centered. And around her neck, catching the fluorescent light with quiet certainty, was the diamond necklace he had accused her of losing. Adrian sat down hard. "You have a lot of confidence coming here," he said. Evelyn studied him for a second, then picked up the phone. "Hello, Adrian." His jaw tightened. "Tell them this is a mistake." "It isn't. You brought documents from my office." "No," she said. "I brought records from my life." He leaned closer. "If you undo this now, maybe we can still settle this privately." Evelyn's eyes did not change. "Privately is where it stayed for too long." Adrian lowered his voice. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," she said softly. "I think truth makes people uncomfortable. That's different." He laughed once, but it came out strained. "You forged those ledgers. You set me up." Evelyn opened a folder and held a page against the glass. "Do you remember 2018? When your forensic accountant warned you some of the offshore structures were risky, and you fired him?" Adrian said nothing. "You replaced him with a boutique compliance firm because they were cheaper and more efficient." She paused. "Do you remember the name?" Adrian's expression shifted. "Vance Stratton," he said. Evelyn nodded. "Vance was my mother's maiden name. Stratton was the name of my first dog." He stared at her. "For 7 years," Evelyn said, "I managed the systems you trusted most because you never imagined I understood them. I organized the reporting channels. I registered the shell companies. I tracked every transfer. I preserved duplicate records. I watched exactly how far your confidence would take you." Adrian gripped the receiver tighter. "You helped build it. I documented it. You moved the money. I traced the money. You knew." "Yes," Evelyn said. "I knew." He sat back as if the chair itself had shifted. "Why wait?" he asked quietly. "Why stay?" Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "Because timing matters." Then she slid another document forward. "My grandmother placed the estate into a protected trust. I could not activate full land rights until I was 35 or until the marriage legally dissolved. If I had walked away early, you would have fought for years, and the land would have remained tied up in court." Her eyes sharpened. "But the moment you forced me out, publicly, maliciously, and in breach of your own agreement, you triggered multiple clauses you never bothered to read." Adrian swallowed. "The prenuptial agreement is no longer enforceable," Evelyn continued. "And the initial capital used to launch Vale Global came from a joint account that included my inheritance." He stared at her. "I don't just control the land, Adrian. I now hold majority interest in the company." His mouth opened, but no words came. All his life, Adrian had survived by being the smartest person in every room. The most prepared. The most aggressive. The one who saw weakness before anyone else did. Now he was face to face with the one person he had turned invisible in his own mind. And she had seen all of him. "Carter isn't coming," Evelyn added. "The corporate retainer account was frozen this morning." "What about Chloe?" Adrian asked suddenly, a flicker of desperation crossing his face. "Where is she?" Evelyn's expression did not move. "She's cooperating with investigators." He blinked. "She kept gifts purchased through misused company funds and agreed to provide testimony in exchange for leniency." Adrian leaned toward the glass. "You can't leave me here." Evelyn stood. "I already did," she said. Then she placed the receiver down and walked out, the sound of her heels receding into the hallway while Adrian sat there, finally understanding what it feels like when the room stops reflecting your power and starts reflecting your choices. But Adrian Vale was not a man who accepted endings easily. 3 weeks later, through a chain of favors, liquidated watches, borrowed promises, and one bond agent willing to gamble on a fallen headline, he secured temporary release. It cost him nearly everything he still had access to. He emerged wearing an ankle monitor, carrying a paper bag of personal items, and still convinced he could reclaim something if he got back inside the house. He had no working credit cards. His personal accounts were under review. His vehicles were inaccessible. So he walked, then hitchhiked, then walked again. By the time he reached the road below Cliffside Point, rain had soaked through his suit and turned the cuffs dark. The main drive was blocked by layers of barriers and warning signs. Private property, no trespassing, managed by Bennett Trust. He stood there staring at the concrete and fencing until his eyes drifted left toward the woods. The same western acreage he had planned to turn into luxury villas now rose before him in thick bramble and wet earth. "If I'm going to my house, I'm not trespassing," he muttered to himself. Not because he believed it, but because saying it out loud made him feel less small. He climbed over the roadside rail and pushed into the trees. The forest answered immediately. Mud swallowed his loafers. Wet branches scraped his face. Thorned vines caught his sleeves. Twice he slipped down slick embankments and had to pull himself back up with both hands. It took him more than 2 hours to cover the distance he once crossed in a climate-controlled vehicle. When he finally broke through the tree line and reached the lawn, he barely looked human. His suit was torn. His face was streaked with mud. His hands were scraped raw. He was trembling from cold, exhaustion, and disbelief. But there it was, the mansion, his symbol, his proof. He staggered to the front door and shoved the key into the lock. It did not turn. He tried again. Nothing. He pounded on the wood. "Open the door!" Silence. He ran around the house to the patio. Locked. The side entrance. Locked. Finally, in a rush of panic, he grabbed a heavy garden stone and struck the kitchen glass. The pane cracked, then shattered inward. An alarm burst through the silence, loud enough to echo off the cliffs. Adrian reached through, unlocked the handle, and stumbled inside. The house felt wrong. Not empty. Abandoned. The air was stale. The silence carried weight. He hurried to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and instantly recoiled. With power cut for weeks, everything inside had spoiled beyond saving. The luxury life he had curated had dissolved into waste and smell and stillness. He made his way to the basement utility room, searching for the industrial backup generator. He found it in the dark and checked the fuel. Empty. He closed his eyes and leaned his forehead against the machine. "She planned for this," he whispered. Back upstairs, he collapsed onto the pale sofa in the living room, leaving mud across the fabric that Chloe had once called imported perfection. "I'm not leaving," he told the darkness. "I'll sit here in the cold if I have to." The alarm eventually timed out. For a moment, the house was still. Then came the low mechanical sound of an engine outside. Adrian rose and moved toward the window. A large flatbed truck was parking just beyond the property line, where the house plot ended and the Bennett land began. Workers unloaded towering portable floodlights and aimed them directly toward the main windows and balcony. Another truck followed, with mounted speaker units. Adrian opened the balcony doors and stepped out. "What is this?" he shouted. The lights came on all at once. They were blinding. White and sharp and relentless, they poured through every glass wall until the entire mansion glowed like a stage set. Adrian stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. There were no heavy drapes anymore. Chloe had removed them months earlier for a cleaner look. Now there was nowhere for darkness to hide. Then the speakers activated. Not music. A looping audio track. Persistent. Jarring. Emotionally impossible to ignore. Not violent. Not obscene. Just deeply unsettling. The kind of sound that makes the mind restless and the body tense. At the edge of the setup stood Malcolm Pendleton with a handheld radio. Adrian stormed to the balcony railing. "This is harassment. I'm calling the police." Malcolm raised a megaphone. "Good evening, Mr. Vale. We are conducting a long-duration environmental stress test for a legal security installation on Bennett Trust property. All activity is within daytime and permitted technical limits." "You can't do this!" Malcolm's answer came back calm and almost cheerful. "The equipment is on trust land. If the glare is inconvenient, landscaping solutions are always an option. Although, of course, you would need rights to the soil." Adrian backed inside. The lights never stopped. The sound never stopped. He tried the basement, but standing water from failed systems had turned parts of it unusable. He tried bedrooms, hallways, bathrooms, closets, the study. Everywhere the light found him. Everywhere the sound followed. Night passed. Then day. Or maybe the reverse. He could not tell. By the second day, fatigue had hollowed him out. Hunger sharpened every thought into irritation. Pride no longer looked like confidence. It looked like a man talking to himself in an empty house while his world was being slowly taken apart from the outside in. Late on the third morning, the front door opened. Adrian looked up from the hallway floor. 2 movers walked in carrying inventory forms. Behind them came Evelyn. She wore a structured coat, work boots, and a yellow safety vest over clean, tailored clothes. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Simply prepared. She glanced around the living room. "Take the sofa first, then the artwork. Handle the framed pieces carefully." Adrian pushed himself upright. "What are they doing?" "One item at a time," Evelyn said to the movers. "Document everything." He moved toward her. "This furniture is mine." Evelyn handed one of the movers a file. "Purchased through the Bennett Residential Improvement Trust. Reclaimed by title owner." The mover nodded and continued. Adrian turned to Evelyn, desperation finally pushing through the remains of pride. "Please, just stop all of this." Evelyn looked at him fully. For the first time, there was no trace of hesitation in her gaze. "Surrender is for people who still hold leverage," she said quietly. "You ran out of that." He swallowed. "What do you want?" "The house has been reported for structural and environmental review," Evelyn said. "Without utilities and with internal damage, it may be classified as unsafe for occupancy." His face changed. "Unsafe?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "And as landowner, I am obligated to remove hazards from the property." Adrian stared at her. Then he understood. "No." The word barely left his mouth. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and removed a folded bus ticket. "One way to Ohio," she said, placing it on the console table beside him. "My sister says temporary work is available if you're willing to earn it." He looked at the ticket, then at her, then back toward the grand staircase behind him, as if the house might suddenly defend him. It did not. From outside came the deep, unmistakable sound of heavy demolition engines climbing the hill. "No," he said again, weaker now. Evelyn's voice remained calm. "You have a few minutes to leave the structure voluntarily." He looked around the room he had used as proof that he could turn anything into his. The polished surfaces, the curated art, the angles of the windows, the place where he had celebrated himself in front of everyone. Now it felt borrowed. Worse, it felt revealed. Adrian Vale, once the man who made people wait outside his office doors, walked out of the mansion with unsteady steps and mud still drying on his clothes. He crossed the lawn under blinding lights, past movers wrapping furniture, past Malcolm reviewing forms, past workers who did not even pretend not to recognize him. At the edge of the drive, he turned. The first machine moved into place. Steel touched stone. Glass burst inward. And 1400 Cliffside Point began to come down. What followed became local spectacle. Media vans gathered near the perimeter road after receiving legal filming access from the trust. Drone footage captured the demolition from above. Reporters spoke in measured tones about property law, hidden clauses, and the collapse of a development empire. Social feeds clipped the visuals into viral segments. The glass walls shattered, imported beams twisted, marble cracked under pressure. Adrian watched part of it from the back of a police cruiser after being briefly detained for violating a no-contact condition and refusing to move away from the active work zone. He pressed one hand against the window, eyes fixed on the hill as his mansion folded into dust and debris. Beside him, the officer driving said nothing for a long time. Then, almost absently, he murmured, "Funny how fast symbols change." 3 months later, the criminal trial began. It filled the courthouse. The case had everything the public loves and fears at once: wealth, secrecy, betrayal, paper trails, video proof, hidden money, and a wife no one had taken seriously until she walked into the legal record with years of organized evidence. Evelyn did not attend every day. She did not need to. The documentation spoke clearly enough on its own. Adrian's legal defense was weaker than anyone expected. With major assets frozen and various corporate accounts locked down, he no longer had the kind of representation his old life would have guaranteed. He sat in the courtroom in a dark suit that fit him poorly now, watching prosecutors bring up transfer records, compliance reports, internal memos, email trails, and testimony from people who had once smiled across polished conference tables while calling him brilliant. Then came the video. The prosecutor dimmed the courtroom lights and played surveillance footage from Adrian's private office. In the recording, Adrian sat with Chloe, relaxed, laughing, speaking openly about shifting funds and hiding them within layers of reporting structure because no one close to him would ever understand what to look for. The room went still. Jurors leaned forward. Adrian stared at the screen as if seeing a stranger who just happened to have his face. "That footage is manipulated," he said when the lights came back. The prosecutor barely looked at him. "It was retrieved from your own security archive." There was no recovery from that moment. The verdict came quickly. Guilty on multiple counts of financial fraud. Guilty on tax-related violations. guilty on money laundering and corporate misrepresentation. When sentencing day arrived, Adrian searched the gallery for a face that might remind him of the world he used to command. Investors, friends, partners, allies, someone. There was no one. Not even Chloe. Most had already distanced themselves. Some had publicly condemned him. Others claimed they had been misled. A few offered no statement at all. At the very back of the room stood Evelyn. She was not smiling. There was no triumph on her face, no performance, no celebration, only something quieter, a deep sadness for time that could not be returned. When the judge read the sentence, Adrian closed his eyes. Years in federal prison, financial restitution far beyond what he could meaningfully repay, long-term oversight, the end of reputation as currency. As officers moved to escort him out, he turned once more toward the gallery. Evelyn met his eyes. She gave one small nod. Not victory, not cruelty. Closure. Then she turned and walked into the sunlight beyond the courtroom doors. While Adrian served his sentence, Evelyn did something no one expected. She did not rebuild the mansion. She did not erect a taller one. She did not keep the hill as a trophy. Instead, she chose restoration. Working with the trust and environmental planners, she transformed the entire property into a protected public reserve and wildlife rehabilitation center. The project honored the land as it had existed long before glass walls and imported stone turned it into a private emblem. Trees native to the region were replanted. A natural pond replaced the old pool basin. The western acreage Adrian had once marked for luxury villas became a trail system open to local families, walkers, students, and visitors. Where spotlight parties once glittered, quiet returned. Where private gates once announced exclusion, a public path invited people in. Evelyn moved into a smaller home across town. Warm, thoughtful, human. She opened a forensic accounting practice focused on helping women uncover financial concealment in high-conflict separations and family disputes. Word spread quickly. Her clients arrived carrying confusion, silence, doubt, and boxes of overlooked paperwork. She taught them what signatures mean, what patterns mean, what disappearing money means, what power looks like when it wears charm first and control second. Over time, Evelyn became something the city admired deeply. Not a social figure, not a symbol of revenge, but a woman who had turned pain into clarity and used it to protect others. Years passed. Then came another rainy Tuesday. Adrian Vale was released early under administrative review and facility reduction measures. He stepped back into the world older than his years, thinner, quieter, and stripped of everything that once made people stand when he entered a room. He could not return to business. His name closed doors before he reached them. Restitution orders followed him. Banking restrictions limited him. Former connections vanished. The man who once approved tower projects and acquisition strategies now searched for hourly work that would overlook a damaged record. Eventually, he found employment as a night janitor in a suburban shopping center. He mopped floors under fluorescent lights. He emptied bins. He cleaned spills nobody noticed. He worked while stores slept and food courts echoed. One evening, while clearing tables near the mall atrium, he saw a newspaper left behind on a bench. The headline caught his eye immediately. Local philanthropist Evelyn Bennett opens historic nature reserve, reveals family letter. He sat down. His hands shook slightly as he read. The article described the opening ceremony for the Eleanor Bennett Nature Reserve, named after Evelyn's grandmother. During landscaping and archival work on the property, crews had uncovered a sealed family time capsule prepared years earlier. Inside was a handwritten letter addressed to Evelyn and meant to be opened only if the land ever returned fully to her name. The newspaper printed an excerpt. Adrian read every word. "My dearest Evelyn, if this letter has reached you, then life has confirmed what I quietly feared and carefully prepared for. Some people look at land and see beauty. Some look at family and see belonging. But some look at both and see only possession. I could not choose your path for you, but I could leave behind protection in case your kindness was ever mistaken for weakness. If the land has returned to you, then the truth has already done its work. Remember this: the estate was never the trap. Pride was. A person who believes he can take everything from others eventually reveals the emptiness inside himself. When that day comes, do not spend your life mourning what it cost you. Build something gentler. Build something worthy. Let the ending teach what the beginning could not. With all my love, Grandmother Eleanor." Adrian lowered the paper slowly. For years he had told himself Evelyn got lucky. Then he told himself she had manipulated circumstances. Then he told himself everyone around him had failed him. But sitting there, in a plastic chair beneath mall lighting, the truth arrived with a different kind of weight. He had not been defeated by luck. He had not been blindsided by one legal clause. He had walked willingly into every consequence his own arrogance prepared. Across the atrium, a large LED screen shifted to a local feature advertisement. Evelyn appeared on the display. Older now, stronger, simpler in style. A white jacket, calm eyes, steady voice. She looked directly into the camera. "Know your worth," she said. "Read the fine print. And never assume silence means someone doesn't understand the room." The ad ended with the name of her firm and a message about financial clarity, recovery, and protection. Adrian watched the screen until it switched to a restaurant promotion. Then he looked down at his mop bucket, at the gray uniform, at his reflection in the polished floor he had just cleaned. He let out a rough laugh that turned into something closer to surrender than grief. Then he stood and went back to work. There was still a spill near the far trash can. And if he didn't finish the section before morning inspection, someone else would mark it down. He had once built a fortress on borrowed ground and believed walls could replace wisdom. He had mistaken charm for power, money for ownership, and noise for authority. He had believed a person could be ignored simply because she chose dignity over spectacle. But the woman he overlooked had been reading everything. The contracts, the accounts, the patterns, the pauses, the future. She did not need to shout to change the ending. She only needed patience, proof, and the courage to stop being invisible the moment truth was ready to stand on its own. So tell me this: did Adrian lose because Evelyn planned better? Or because he spent too many years believing he would never be questioned? And was the real inheritance the land itself? Or the wisdom to know exactly when to let someone reveal who they are? Some people think power is the ability to remove someone from a house. Real power is knowing who holds the deed, who kept the records, and who stayed quiet long enough to see the whole truth. And in the end, Adrian lost the mansion, the company, the illusion, and the audience. Evelyn gained something far more lasting.